Here's the story. It's 1920, the War of Independence. A local IRA gang here in County Clare capture a British magistrate and they bring him down here to this beach, Doonbeg. They bury him up to his neck in sand so that when the tide comes in, he'll drown. However, the tide doesn't come far enough in to drown him, so they dig him up out of the sand and bury him closer to the sea. This time they put him facing the tide so he can see his own death coming. He drowns. It's an upsetting, disturbing, incredible story that made it into all the papers and all the history books. It's the kind of story that you hear about pirates. It's almost too fantastical a story to be true. And you know what? It's not.
How you doing? Are you all right?
5 years ago, Jeff Simmons came from London to Doonbeg. He was researching the life of his granduncle, Alan Lendrum. Alan was the local magistrate here. One day in September 1920, he was on his way to court when he came upon a roadblock manned by 4 IRA members. He had 2 things they wanted, a gun and a car. He was taken from the car and killed some time later. While Jeff was trying to find out what happened to his granduncle, local people said he should talk to this man, Owen Shanahan. He's from Doonbeg, and by coincidence, he was trying to find out what happened to his granduncle, Willie Shanahan, a local IRA policeman. Willie wasn't involved in Alan Lendrum's killing, but he was captured by the British Army along with Michael McNamara. They were tortured for information, and when they wouldn't talk, they were killed. Shanahan and McNamara are remembered at the local GAA pitch and in a 90th anniversary memorial service in Doonbeg Church.
It was forward looking out to a new hope.
These were hard, brutal times. As Siegfried Sassoon put it in his poem, Reconciliation, men fought like brutes and hideous things were done, and you have nourished hatred harsh and blind. But in that Golgotha perhaps you'll find the mothers of the men who killed your son.
Owen Shanahan is there in the front row, but beside him, so is Jeff Simmons, because this is an ecumenical service for the magistrate as well as the 2 IRA men. So what pushed these 2 men to research their granduncles? In both cases, it was the written word.
My dad was the rector of the Church of Ireland in Kilskeary, County Tyrone, and inside the church there was a plaque up to him saying that in memory of Alan, killed by Irish rebels. So I was always kind of curious about that, but nobody really gave me a kind of straight answer about you know, what exactly he'd been doing.
When I was growing up, the story appeared in a book called The Black and Tans by Richard Bennett. And I remember asking my father, I said, what's the story with this? This says that the volunteers took Alan Lendrum, buried him to his neck on a beach, on this beach, and waited for the tide to drown him. And my father said, well, that never happened. And I remember an uncle of mine bringing me to this beach at one time, and I remember him saying to me specifically, maybe someday you'll write the correct version.
What did happen that day in 1920 when Alan Lendrum drove up to the roadblock in Doonbeg? In his research, Owen turned up this important document, the magistrate's death certificate. Cause of death, shooting. The story of being buried alive on the beach was a lie.
In reaching for the handbrake, his intentions were mistaken by 4 volunteers who lay in wait, because it was known that he carried a gun, if not 2. One of them discharged his gun, and Lendrum was wounded.
Having been wounded, Alan Lendrum was shot a second time and killed. His body was hidden in a local tidal lake and some time later retrieved and returned to his family. There was local unease at the killing.
As a matter of fact, he was quite well liked, and there was acute embarrassment in the area about his killing afterwards. It was not intended. It wasn't intended that he would be killed.
Although they weren't involved in the killing, Willie Shanahan and Michael McNamara were known local IRA men, and they went into hiding. 3 months later, at Christmas, they were captured as a result of a tip-off. They were tortured and shot without trial by the British Army. Willie Shanahan and Michael McNamara were buried in Doonbeg Cemetery on Christmas Day 1920. At that cemetery, on the day of the memorial service, Jeff and Owen laid a wreath and a spray from Alan Lendrum's grave in Tyrone. Then they gave a talk in the local community hall, telling stories of their respective granduncles, the IRA man and the magistrate killed by the IRA.
Poor child, he's handcuffed. Well, he can get his left foot. That one out. You always knew you were going to get I was scared you have made
You would be hands out, you would be
very naughty.
But stories can be dangerous. The story of the drowning of Alan Lendrum was told to paint the Irish as barbarians. And stories about Shanahan and McNamara's capture led to a local school teacher being shot by the IRA as an informer. So why tell these stories? Leave it. It was over 90 years ago.
I strongly believe in the theory of constructivism. I believe that history is constructed over periods of time. Not always does the first person get the story right. It often takes input from generations to tell the whole story. And that's really what we are about here. And I don't believe that the truth can be harmful.